Ukraine is delivering powerful strikes against Russia. Oil refineries are shutting down one after another. Her fighters blew up an underground depot in the Tula region. Dozens of ambulances are on the scene. The US has provided Ukraine with secret weapons for strikes on Russia's rear. The Kremlin is increasing the recruitment of contract soldiers. Preparation for an offensive? An United Russia official won moral damages in court from an 85-year-old pensioner for the phrase, lies as he breathes. Hello, my name is Yulia Kokan, and right now, the main news. But first, please like this video and subscribe to our channel so we don't lose touch with you on YouTube. It was restless again in Russia. There was a fire at night in Russia's Rostov. At first, a drone alert was announced in the city, and eyewitnesses reported hearing explosions. Then a large-scale fire broke out. The Russian Telegram channel Baza reports that this is the case. In Rostov, reeds caught fire. Do we believe it?
In Rostov-on-Don, there is a major fire near the Rostov arena. Judging by the footage published by local residents, the fire broke out on the left bank of the Don. According to preliminary information, reeds are burning. The cause of the fire is still unknown.
It was also tense in occupied Crimea. In Sevastopol, passenger maritime transport has been suspended. Locals report explosions in the area of the old airport where aviation fuel is stored. Propaganda media reported that Kaluga and Volgograd were covered by a carpet of something, e.g. smoke or attacks.
Announcements regarding the arrival and departure of aircraft have been introduced at Kaluga Airport, according to Rosaviatsia. Announcements regarding the arrival and departure of aircraft have been introduced at Volgograd Airport, according to Rosaviatsia.
In Kuban, Krasnodar, the local oil refinery burned by a drone attack. Footage of the fire the Krasnodar oil refinery, Robert Brody, commander of Ukrainian SOF, also published. And that's not all. Last night, the Syzran oil refinery in the Samara region was on fire again. The General Staff has already officially confirmed strikes on both the Syzran and Krasnodar oil refineries.
On the night of August 30th, units of the Unmanned Systems Forces and Special Operations Forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, in cooperation with other components of the Defense Forces, struck the Krasnodar oil refinery. This oil refinery produces light petroleum products with an annual volume of 3 million tons, gasoline, diesel, aviation gasoline, and is involved in supplying the Russian armed forces. Numerous explosions and fires have been recorded at the facility. Additionally, units of the Ukrainian Armed Forces unmanned systems have once again struck the Syzran oil refinery in the Samara region. The facility produces gasoline, diesel fuel, aviation kerosene, fuel oil, and bitumen. The processing capacity until August 2025 is 8.5 million tons per year. A fire has been reported in the area of the facility. The results of the strike are being clarified.
And one more piece of news. GUR fighters destroyed an explosives warehouse in Russia's Tula region. Union's intelligence sources reported that on the night of August 30th, an underground explosives warehouse was attacked on the territory of PAO Alexinsky chemical plant in the city of Alexin. Pyroxylin was stored in the secured warehouse. Oh, that smokeless powder, which is used in small arms ammunition, artillery systems, and certain rocket engines. Local residents heard explosions, after which fire trucks and ambulances were dispatched to the scene. Well, I have to say, I like how it burns, and as they say, burn bright so you don't go out. Washington has provided Ukraine with weapons capable of striking targets in the Russian rear, but the type and range of these weapons remain strictly classified. This was stated in an interview with Fox News by the U.S. Permanent Representative to NATO, Matthew Whitaker. According to him, the U.S. has directly sold Ukraine weapons worth $1 billion. And within a month, allies spent an additional similar amount on purchasing weapons for the Ukrainian army.
Trump is acting so that Ukraine can continue to defend itself, providing it with certain capabilities for deeper strikes, which obviously can also help in offensive operations. Just in the past month, Ukrainians have already disabled about 20% of Russia's oil refining capacity.
However, it is worth noting, recently President Zelensky stated that for attacks deep inside Russia, Ukraine uses its own weapons and does not consult with the US on this matter. And what do you think, what weapons is Ukraine actually using to strike deep into Russia? The Ukrainian armed forces have liberated part of the territory near Kupiansk. This is confirmed by data from Deep State. According to the updated maps, Ukrainian forces managed to push the enemy back in Mern, in the Kupiansk area. Meanwhile, the earlier information published by the Institute for the Study of War about the occupiers advancing along Highway 105, Kharkiv-Belgorod, turned out to be inaccurate. Journalists contacted the head of the Derhachi District Military Administration, Vyacheslav Zdorenko. He, citing the commander of the 58th Separate Motorized Infantry Brigade, denied any enemy advance east of the settlement of Kazacha-Lopan. According to Zdorenko, several enemy sabotage and reconnaissance groups tried to cross the border but were eliminated near the approaches to the Hoptivka checkpoint. Details about what is currently happening on and around the front lines are in our report.
The Russian army is intensifying its attacks in the Zaporizhzhia direction. This is footage of the 291st Motorized Rifle Regiment operating in the Orikhiv area. Russian soldiers are attacking Ukrainian military equipment with drones and threatening Ukrainian soldiers on camera.
Come back again soon for even more. Glory to Mother Russia and her people.
The Institute for the Study of War also notes an increase in activity in the Zaporizhzhia direction. They are confident that Russian forces are preparing for a large-scale offensive in this area and are now actively probing the ground.
Russia may attempt to launch new offensive operations in the Zaporizhzhia direction. A representative of a Ukrainian brigade operating in the Zaporizhzhia direction reported that Russian forces are likely preparing for a large-scale offensive in this area, amassing troops, preparing reserves, regrouping, and conducting reconnaissance in the frontline areas. The representative stated that this increase in Russian activity is the first sign that Russian forces are preparing for a larger-scale operation. He also noted that Russian forces are striking the antennas of Ukrainian drone command posts. The representative stated that Russian forces are unlikely to attack with a large amount of heavy equipment, as they did in the spring of 2025, since Ukrainian drones and remote mining have proven effective in destroying heavy equipment.
But as before, the Pokrovsk and Lyman directions remain the most intense. The occupiers carried out 37 and 31 assault actions, respectively, over the past day. To maintain this level of intensity in military operations, for the first time since the start of the full-scale aggression against Ukraine, the Russian state is spending every second ruble from all federal budget revenues on military needs. This was reported by the Moscow Times. And despite such colossal expenditures, the successes of the Russian army are insignificant.
On the battlefield today, as we know, there are fierce battles. Today, the enemy is trying to maintain its pressure in almost all directions. And although those who predicted for us at the beginning of this summer, especially some Western colleagues, a collapse and failure of the front, today they are loudly writing that, look, the Russian summer 2025 offensive campaign has failed. We are fighting by all the rules, and that is our strength. That is what will help us win.
The Ukrainian defense forces are giving Russian soldiers no respite, both on temporarily occupied territory and at sea. For example, Gore fighters seriously damaged a missile ship in the Sea of Azov.
Fighters from the special unit of the Ukrainian Defense Intelligence, Ghosts, used an aerial drone strike to damage the ship's radar, while special forces from the Department of Active Operations of the Defense Intelligence attacked a vessel carrying Caliber missiles. As a result of the strikes, the Russian missile ship, which was in the potential launch zone for Caliber missiles in the Temirtausk Bay, sustained damage and was forced to leave its combat patrol area. Defense Intelligence of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine.
On the same day, fighters from the main intelligence directorate managed to destroy a radar station from the S-400 system on the occupied Crimean Peninsula. This radar station is capable of detecting targets at a distance of up to 600 kilometers and simultaneously tracking 300 targets. Successful defense along the entire front line and targeted strikes in the rear and on occupied territory only strengthen Ukraine's position ahead of possible preliminary negotiations with the Kremlin.
If the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin does not agree to meet with the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, by Monday, August 1st, he will deceive US President Donald Trump. This was stated by French President Emmanuel Macron, according to Reuters. The publication writes, Macron stated that the latest massive attack on Kiev demonstrated the gap between Putin's position regarding a ceasefire or peace talks and the reality.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
The president of France reminded that Trump set a deadline for Putin to agree to a meeting with Zelensky by September 1st.
If this is not fulfilled by Monday, I believe it will once again mean that Putin has deceived President Trump.
Let me remind you, after the summit in Washington, US President Donald Trump suggested that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and Russian dictator Vladimir Putin hold a bilateral meeting. After that, discussions began about the location of the meeting. By the way, the Ukrainian president is convinced that the Russians are doing everything possible to prevent the meeting from taking place. And Trump emphasized that Russia will face serious consequences if Putin does not agree to meet with Zelensky. And what do you think? Will the meeting between Zelensky and Putin take place? If yes, where could it take place? Write your thoughts in the comments. I'll definitely read them. US President Donald Trump proposed deploying Chinese troops as peacekeepers in post-war Ukraine, supporting a proposal first put forward by Russian President Vladimir Putin. This was reported by the Financial Times. According to the publication's sources, last week at a meeting with European leaders and the president of Ukraine at the White House, Trump suggested inviting China to provide peacekeepers to monitor a neutral zone along the 300-kilometer front line as part of a peace settlement with Russia. That's a lie, said a senior Trump administration official, adding that there were no discussions about Chinese peacekeepers. Meanwhile, European countries have proposed establishing a 40-kilometer buffer zone on the borders between Russia and Ukraine, controlled by peacekeepers, as part of preparations for peace talks. Details in the report.
The creation of a 40-kilometer wide buffer zone is an initiative being considered by European partners as part of a peace agreement, according to anonymous sources cited by political publications. Allegedly, according to journalists, Moscow has supported the idea. There has been no response from Ukraine yet. This is not surprising, since the creation of a buffer zone would most likely mean the loss of some territories currently controlled by Kiev. The only person to openly comment on this idea was Jim Townsend, a former Pentagon official who oversaw policy on Europe and NATO in the Obama administration.
They're grasping at straws. The Russians are not afraid of the Europeans, and if they think that a couple of British and French observers will stop them from marching into Ukraine, they're mistaken.
European diplomats are trying not to comment on the de facto partition of Ukraine. It also remains unclear who is actually willing to send their peacekeepers and when. So far, only the French and the British have spoken positively. The commander of the Lithuanian forces stated that his subordinates would only go to Ukraine in the event of a ceasefire or a peace agreement. The authorities of Poland and Germany are opposed, just like the United States. Another problem is the number of troops. As of today, NATO is having difficulties preparing rapid response forces to defend the alliance's eastern flank from a possible future Russian attack. This requires 300,000 personnel. At the same time, patrolling along a potential buffer zone would require an additional 40,000 to 60,000 servicemen. They will not only monitor compliance with agreements, but also train defense forces.
NATO members are negotiating with US representatives about providing satellite intelligence and air support. However, they are not counting on much greater involvement. Senior Pentagon officials have already informed their European colleagues that the US role in any security guarantees for Ukraine will be minimal. The US Department of Defense did not respond to a request for comment. The US is perhaps the only NATO country with enough satellites to provide the intelligence needed to monitor whether Russia is violating the terms of a ceasefire or peace agreement.
These proposals from Europeans who are troubled by a bloody war on their doorstep are perceived by Ukrainians as empty words.
If they actually provide troops, then yes, because other restrictions on the Russians don't work. On paper, it's not worth a damn. Send missiles, send troops, send weapons. That's a question for Europe. Is there actually any weaponry? No. Are they ready to send troops? They are, but not all of them, and not now. After a peaceful settlement. We tell them one simple thing, friends, you are preparing for war that the Russians will attack you. We can make sure that they don't attack. Give the army now, bring them to the territory of Ukraine already now, and the situation will be over. But Europeans think we have Budapest, which turned out to be a blank piece of paper. Zero. We have the case of Ishkeria, better known today as Kadyrovshchina.
It is interesting that the Russian dictator was the first to announce the creation of a buffer zone in Ukraine in the spring of 2025. Then this statement became, as it were, a justification for Russian military aggression in Sumy and Kharkiv regions. After a massive attack on Ukraine which killed 23 people in Kyiv alone, the Kremlin sent Maria Zakharova to the microphone. In plain Russian, she once again voiced the Russians' conditions. The peace treaty must include demilitarization, denazification, and a neutral, non-aligned, and non-nuclear status for Ukraine. Interestingly, Zakharova made this statement on the Day of Remembrance for the fallen defenders of Ukraine. This day was established at the end of August for a reason. 11 years ago, the Russians, by agreement, allowed the encircled Ukrainian armed forces near Ilovaisk to withdraw through the so-called Green Corridor. But they did not keep their promises and simply shot unarmed soldiers as if at a shooting range.
Russia does not plan to end the war. The Kremlin is preparing for an offensive and is already increasing its contract recruitment targets. This was stated by Russian Defense Ministry representative Andrei Belousov.
The key issue for ensuring offensive operations remains the staffing of the troops. Work in this area is progressing successfully. This year, we have increased the recruitment plan for contract military service. Overall, the staffing targets are being met.
And what do you think Russia is really planning? Meanwhile, as the Kremlin continues to squeeze the maximum out of its war machine, 2/3 of Russia's coal companies have become unprofitable. The Russian coal industry, one of the largest raw material sectors of the economy, employing hundreds of thousands and supporting dozens of single industry towns, continues to sink deeper into crisis. In the first half of 2025, coal companies posted a combined loss of 185.2 billion rubles, according to Rosstat statistics. On average, coal producers were losing money at a rate of more than 1 billion rubles per day, and the share of companies operating at a loss reached 66%. Our journalists have all the details.
And in Russia, yet another sector of the economy has collapsed. 2/3 of coal companies have become unprofitable.
I seriously doubt that I can add anything truly new or significant here.
What is there to add? Just the facts and confirmation. The coal industry, one of the main pillars of the Russian economy, is literally falling apart due to sanctions, falling prices, and declining demand.
A certain amount of money is being allocated to maintain the situation. But in order to allocate money, you actually need to have that money. To take something, you have to put something in, as it was said in a well-known work. So, you need to have something to give. And now the budget deficit is becoming simply astronomical. In other words, people are openly saying that the Russian budget doesn't just have a hole, it has a gaping chasm. Let me remind you, 4.5, almost 5 trillion rubles is the deficit of the Russian budget for the first 7 months. And considering that, probably for the first time in Russia's history, the liquid part of the National Welfare Fund has been depleted. That's 4 trillion rubles. So it turns out that this little stash or the money box, if we compare it to a family budget where you take money from, there's no longer enough there to cover your needs. So obviously something needs to be cut.
In the first half of 2025, coal companies suffered losses totaling 185.2 billion rubles. On average, coal producers were losing money at a rate of over 1 billion rubles per day.
But nevertheless, these net losses, what does a net loss actually indicate? It shows the main trend in the industry that the companies in this sector are operating at a loss. In other words, these are different companies and each of them is showing a loss. And so we get the total amount of loss, this net loss. That is, it's unprofitable to be involved in coal, it's unprofitable to pay wages to coal miners.
Sanctions have blocked access to key global markets and the remaining deliveries are accompanied by enormous logistical costs.
It's important to understand that when people talk about industries in Russia dying off one after another, the very first industry is coal. Moreover, the problems in the coal industry were already mentioned back in August 2022, because it was in August 2022 that another EU sanctions package was adopted, in which it was stated that the European Union would stop buying coal from Russia. And Russia's coal industry, especially in certain regions like the main coal region of Kupiansk, was built on exporting coal to Europe. In fact, the entire Russian economy, even going back to the Soviet era, was built on the model of extract resources and sell them to Europe.
Coal prices on the global market have fallen to 4-year lows. According to estimates by the Ministry of Energy, 27 companies in the sector, which account for a tenth of the country's coal production, are on the verge of bankruptcy. By 2030, Russia could lose another 10% of its maritime exports.
Well, first of all, you still have to make it to 2030. And in the context of the Russian economy, by the way, that's not so easy to do. There's a huge deficit there. But what is meant is that they will, first of all, cut back, increase, but not the Navy. By the way, right now, many people are saying that Trump could actually impose sanctions against Russia. I think he might start increasing the number of non-sanctioned tankers when ships will simply be afraid to enter the territorial waters of Russia. This loss of maritime shipping means there will be fewer willing to enter Russian ports and accordingly fewer opportunities to transport anything by sea.
For many years, coal has been the backbone of the economy in entire regions of Russia. And if the industry collapses, local budgets will collapse with it and thousands of families will be left without any way to earn even a little money.
Now, considering the traditions and the problems that have accumulated in Russia's economy, I wouldn't be surprised if coal miners are the first to start serious protests in Russia, despite the fact that protesting isn't really customary in Russia and everyone is afraid of their government. But, you know, as they say, when your fridge is stocked, you still believe what you see on TV. When your fridge is empty, no matter what they tell you on TV, you won't believe it. And no matter how much the authorities say you can't do something, you'll go ahead and do it. Simply because due to these problems, your fridge has become empty.
As of today, according to official data, 30 coal enterprises are at risk and more than 15,000 workers are facing the threat of dismissal.
Now, the term Rashism is officially recognized in Ukraine. President Volodymyr Zelensky has signed the law on state policy of historical memory as one of the key elements of national security. For the first time at the state level, it is clearly defined. The war for Ukraine's independence, historical anti-Russian propaganda, and crimes against the Ukrainian people. This is stated in the card for Draft Law 13273. A notable innovation is the formalization of the term Rashism. It is defined as a hybrid totalitarian ideology that combines Russian chauvinism, imperialism, as well as elements of communist and Nazi practices. Great news, isn't it? I see in the comments that we have a lot of viewers from Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, Georgia, the USA, and Europe. We are very grateful for your support. Let us know which country you're watching from and whether you believe that good will triumph over evil in this war. I'll be happy to read your comments this evening and like the ones I enjoy the most. Meanwhile, let's continue. In the meantime, Russian patriotism has gradually, or perhaps not so gradually, turned into the servility and leader worship typical of that country. Clips are going viral online, and before watching them, I recommend grabbing a basin. See for yourself.
A shoe bag? Rulers like these, so bold. A diary, just look how patriotic it is. And all the notebooks have Vladimir Vladimirovich on them too. There's this one and these as well. A pencil case too. What else? Bookmarks. But most importantly, how do you carry all this? A backpack?
So what do you think of what you've seen? Write your thoughts, don't hold back in the comments. And finally, here's another dose of cringe-worthy news from Russia, where traditional values have long replaced basic common sense. For example, the head of a district in Kuban, a member of United Russia, Maxim Bondarenko, a true Putin-era bureaucrat, sued an 80-year-old pensioner for 1,000 rubles just because she was telling the truth online. Residents of Primorsko-Akhtarsk were discussing Bondarenko's inaction, and she wrote the following.
Our district head lies all the time. He lies as easily as he breathes. The main thing is he actually believes his own lies. And that's already a dangerous symptom. He already knows everything about making promises and fantasies. Not everyone knows what kinds of miracles are happening around us. It's creepy, like in a Khrushchevka. It really is frightening. When the purges start in the ranks, then things will really heat up.
But the purge started not where it was supposed to. The court sided with United Russia. The appeals and cassation complaints left the decision unchanged. Now an 80-year-old pensioner has to pay moral damages to an official. That's what Russian values are like. Complete absurdity and madness. How do you like our news? Do you enjoy it or not so much? Write to us about what we should change to become better. we will definitely take it into account. In the meantime, please like this video to support what we do. And be sure to subscribe to our channel Ukraine Today so you don't miss future episodes. See you soon!